Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in and for catching this, our very first episode of Nail the Numbers GAB Lab. I'm your host, Taunya Woods Richardson, and today's show is all about rural resilience for the restaurateur. Today's guest, Ron Robichaud, fits the bill perfectly. Listen, Ron is no stranger to numbers, to entrepreneurship. He even has copious amounts of expertise in the area of rural economic development. He has been an entrepreneur, he's taught entrepreneurship, he has supported the organizations that support entrepreneurs. He's even written a book on entrepreneurship and finance. Ron's the full meal deal, and he's here with us today. I'm going to encourage you to catch his full bio in the show notes below. But for now, I invite you to sit back, to relax, enjoy the show, and dare I say it, digest the content. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the GAB Lab. Ron, it is so great to have you on the show today. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, I have to tell you, I'm very excited that you're here, especially for this series, the Rural Resilience series for restaurant owners. You know, numbers have always been important, but they seem to be, I don't even want to say extra important, but it seems to be this is the time that most business owners are actually willing and eager to look at their numbers. And so appreciative for you to show up here and share with us your superpowers of profiting in business and show us how it's done. You know, I have, for the last, 6-7 months now, I have been on my soapbox letting people know that COVID did not cause the financial fragility in life and business. It simply exposed it. And I know for a good chunk of time now, you've been going across the country, encouraging business owners to profit in business, to have healthy businesses by looking at their numbers. So where should we start? With restaurant owners right now, restaurants a tricky business to start off with, let alone through a pandemic. What are you suggesting for restaurateurs in this time of age?
Well, you know, COVID is a perfect time in order to take a look back and see how you're running your business and to make sure that you have processes in place that allow you to make sure that you prosper even in a time like this. And so, you know, the ironic thing, as you mentioned it earlier, is that the type of business that changes hands the most is actually the restaurant business. So they're in a challenging position as it is. But, you know, those businesses that can actually have a healthy bottom line can overcome the ebbs and lows and adjust accordingly and to make those changes. So when we look at, you know, we can look at COVID as a catalyst. So we can look at it from where are we now, what are the opportunities with even the situation that we're in, and how can we make sure that we benefit from that the most. One of the things that we've realized over the last number of weeks where we've done some research is people need to have confidence and feel safe to go into their business. So I think one of the things that we have to make sure during COVID, and COVID is a catalyst, which doesn't really, whether we have COVID or not, you want people to be, to come and patron your business in a safe environment, and also to be able to, you know, get a good meal and to be able to leave very satisfied. So it is time to look back at your operation, look at your whole business. We've had some owners, you know, this is a perfect time. If you need the kitchen clean from top to bottom, what a perfect time. I mean, this is a slow time and certainly in some areas. So this would be a really good time to just take a whole look at your business, maybe paint a little bit, maybe, you know, do some cleaning in the front end, clean the windows, you know, like all those little things that normally we neglect as we're so busy running operations.
Beautiful. And, you know, one of the things that I know you always advocate for in the boot camps that we've done together in the past, the face-to-face, which seems like a lifetime ago now, but you're always bringing up this performance scorecard and taking a look at your past performance and making sure that each one of these segments, whether it's revenue, cost of goods, operating expenses, that it's hitting a certain benchmark. Would you still advocate for business owners right now, even though we're in the midst of a pandemic, kind of looking at their past performance to see how it's stacking up against those key benchmarks? And what are those benchmarks? What are those ratios that we're looking to achieve?
No, and absolutely. I mean, the quickest way to do that is to take a look at your last year's financial statements or the last few years, and just simply take a quick look at what your revenues for the total business was, and what did it cost you in food, but not only in food, but you got to have the packaging and the condiments and everything that it costs you to deliver that product or service, not necessarily the labor at this point. So all food costs and packaging and condiments and that should never be more than 30% of your revenues. So a good way to look at it is whenever you're doing a plate and putting something on your plate, just analyze how much did it actually cost you for everything that's on your plate. And then an easy way to determine what your price is, and I know we're jumping here a little bit, but just multiply by 3.3. So keeping your food costs down by 30%, keeping your labor costs down below 30%, typically we see 24 to 28%, but if you keep it down below 30%, that leaves it's 60% for food and labor. It leaves you 40% to pay all overhead expenses and to leave you preferably with a net profit of 10%. Because the 10% is so critical, not only in this sector, but in every sector. You know, maybe I'll use this as a point to make a statement here, is that 50% of all businesses never make it to the fifth year. This is the same statistics we've had for the last 30 years.
Sorry, Ron, did you say 1.5 or 5.0?
5.0. 50%. 50% of all businesses never make it to the fifth year. Not only nationally, but on an international level. It's been the same results for the last 30 years. 80% of those businesses that actually have surpassed 5 years make less than 1% net profit. If we were able to increase our net profits of those 80% businesses from 1 to 4%, now the government has increased their debt quite a bit in this year, in 2020, but prior to 2020, if we had increased the net profits from 1 to 4%, we would eliminate the Canadian debt in less than 4 years and not increase any taxes. But we're not focusing on net profits. Everybody is sort of okay with, you know, modest profits of 1 or 2%. Yeah. So it's really about trying to get that bottom line up.
I love that. I think that's a very, very, very important point to stress here. Net profits, and this is what I love about the work that you do, Ron, because you are an advocate for planning for profit. It is not the afterthought, it is the forethought. And the work that you do, you help business owners actually you help them understand how to get to that net profit. Because this is why, you know, 2 weeks into COVID, we saw the collapse that we did because people didn't have the profit. They didn't have the retained earnings. They were barely, like 1% hurts my heart, 4% hurts my heart. And, you know, oftentimes in my experience, I'm sure you've witnessed this as well, that 1 to 4% does not include the owner's salary.
That's correct.
So then you throw that in and you're under the bus. Right? Like it's,
exactly.
So please take that away. Listeners, viewers, profit has to come first. So Ron, just to recap then, what we're looking for, our total revenues would be 100%. The cost of goods, AKA direct costs, now you're talking material and inputs only, right? Are going to sit at 30%. But I also know that you get business owners to get very specific and detailed. This is the napkins, this is the condiments, this is the salt and pepper, this is the takeout bag, this is the receipt, right?
Even if there's freight to bring in those products, you have to add that to your price.
Beautiful.
It's all the costs incurred in order to sell that product again.
Okay. So I have a question to come back to on that, but 30% for cost of goods. And then labor, so you're not getting them to do the work of understanding how much time it takes to prepare that sandwich. You're saying overall operating labor as an operating expense or indirect expense should be sitting at 30, and then we've got an additional 40 for the additional operating expenses, and then 10% net profit.
The net profit comes out of the 40%.
It comes out of the 40. Okay, so 30 for operating, 10 for net. So 30, 30, 30, 10. So my question is, I know in the restaurant business, there's a lot of spoilage. There's a lot of wasted food. Where do we put that? What would you kind of
Cost of
bank on for
goods.
cost of goods?
And it should not be more than 30%. All your
All
cost
of
of
it
goods,
in.
including waste
Okay.
in that. If you're
Okay.
having waste, then we have an issue on inventory control.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So what I'm loving about what you're saying here too is I know that you have very generously offered up a performance scorecard, which we've included in the show notes below. So make sure that you download that. It allows you to put your numbers in. And again, what I love about your work is it takes the dollar value of your numbers and it converts it into percentages. So it makes easy work, light lifting of what we're asking these business owners to do. Let's talk about, are you okay moving into menu costing, the menu items and costing on that? Because I kind of feel like we're in that and maybe we've covered a big piece of it, but is there anything else you want to talk to there?
Absolutely. So the issue there that I see with a lot of restaurants is that, you have people, they tell me that they've been in the industry for 25, 30 years in the food sector. And, it's interesting. And I know they can prepare food very well. But then when you look at the kitchen where they're preparing the food, we talk about quality and quantity. So one of the things that I find is that when we're pricing menu items, for most people, is they look at, okay, well, so much of this, so much of that, so much of this. So most of the cooks measure by volume. We have a cup of this, or we have a bowl of this, or we have this. But then they're paying for all of their products by weight. So if you go into a restaurant, I can go into a restaurant and I can ask for the same meal in the same restaurant, 3 different shifts from 3 different people preparing the food in the kitchen. I will have 3 different plates. So we know there's an issue with control in the kitchen when it comes to quantity, especially. Now, the quality is just as important. So this is where we're talking about making sure that the food is fresh. It's not prepared too early in advance so that it doesn't deteriorate, over time, because it's all perishable goods, and you want to have inventory that turns over quite a bit. So we're normally in the food sector, your inventory should be turning over about every 2 weeks. So that allows all of your products to be fresh all the time. So when we look really at most businesses, it really not just the restaurant business, but all businesses. Small businesses in Canada, not only in Canada, but around the world, cannot compete on price. We need to compete on quality, and we need to compete on service. So this is where, again, if you're trying to attract people in your business because you're the lowest price in town, well, guess what? All you're going to do is you're going to attract the bargain hunters. And as soon as they find a lower price someplace else, they're going to drop you like a hot potato. So coming back to the quantity and the quality, you got to have that consistency. I mean, when you go to any of the franchises, you can go to one here, you can go to one in Alberta, you can go one in Nova Scotia, wherever you go. If you ask for this, you're going to get the same thing. It's going to taste the same. It's the same volume. It's the same. Everything is the same. So people this is where the confidence comes in. But then when you start changing it around, well, some people will stop coming at a certain time of day because they know that's the person in the kitchen and they don't put enough on the plate. Or they'll come another time and say, well, it's overloaded. So this is where, again, people in your kitchen, when we talk about quality and quantity, which will eventually help you control your cost of goods to your 30%, because now you're going to be measuring by weight, which is how you price or how you pay your product. And then this is how you're going to be able to determine what the value of your product is on your plate, multiplied by 3.3. Bingo, you get your price, your menu price, and you also have your cost of goods at 30%. And by filling out the performance scorecard at the end of a period, so let's say at the end of a week or the end of a month, all your revenues, all your purchases, your inventory may fluctuate a little bit, but for the most part will be the same. If your cost of goods is showing at 35 or 40%, you got a problem in the kitchen.
And what I think is really important about what you just said there is when you're reviewing these numbers, right? So this isn't, ideally, you're not doing it at the end of the month. You're definitely not doing it 4 months after year end when you get your notice to readers, because when you're looking at it live, real time, ideally every week, you're in a position to fix the problem versus having a runaway train, right?
Because you can do this forensic analysis, because you can go and look at every shift and it would tell you
Yeah.
exactly what's going on.
Beautiful.
So you can always
Beautiful.
tell what problem areas is happening in.
Well, and you know what I think is so important about what you speak of here as well. I'm hearing the word consistency. You've mentioned that several times, and it's not only consistency in yes, consistency in the product and the volume that you're using, which then helps you to monitor those costs. As you mentioned, it's consistency in the experience. And this is where I know employees sometimes think that they're doing the customer a service by throwing on the extra olives or, you know, giving the extra portion, but it actually, it dilutes the experience. Then it's inconsistent, and the whole brand, right, and value of the brand starts to erode. So consistency on so many levels, so important there. And I think back to the McDonald's story, right, with Ray Kroc, where it's half a teaspoon of ketchup, half a teaspoon of mustard, half a teaspoon of relish, right? And it's every single, and that's exactly as you nailed it, right? That's how the franchise model got started. It was those exacting standards.
And there's no reason why you can't run your business as a franchise model, even though you're not a franchise. And I think this is the key. I mean, Michael Gerber, he's the one that introduced the entrepreneurial, the myth. And it's all about running your business. You, as an owner, you don't have to be there all the time. If your processes are in place and you know exactly what goes in every plate and how it's supposed to look and how it's supposed to be, served, you're not going to have that issue. To the point that you just made, Taunya, is that if the person added those extra olives or whatever that may be, well, the next time you come in, you get somebody, oh, I don't have the olives. You're going to be disappointed. So now you're starting, so it's really your consistency is very important.
Consistency is key. The other piece too is I know a lot of people talk about the restaurant business as being a penny-based business, where you've got to measure every single penny that you're spending and that you're earning, and there's no exception to that in the kitchen and on the plate, right? You stay with that. So again, everybody listening and watching, Ron has been extremely generous by providing a worksheet to actually start to cost out these menu items. And so to Ron's point too, when you've got the cost, then there's a formula in there, just multiply it by 3.33, and that's going to give you your suggested price, right? And so that will get you your profit at the end of the day. Because Ron, as you always point out in the boot camps, every single penny that you're not budgeting for, whether it's in direct cost or indirect costs, it's coming off your profit margin. And it's those little pennies that add up.
Well, take care of the pennies, the dolls will take care of themselves.
There you go.
And they say a penny saved is a penny earned. Well, it's the same thing in any business. I mean, if you're going to save 1% in food costs, and if you save 1% in food costs, where's it going to go? To your bottom line. So now you got 1% more net profits. So if 80% of all businesses in Canada are making less than 1% net profit, here's a little added point. Just increase your price by 1%. So on the $10 item, you're going to charge $1.10. $10.10. If you do that, you have just doubled your profits.
Look at that. That easy.
That
easy, right? I know you've also mentioned in the past that every year, really, you should be increasing your price by 2% just because of inflation, right? These small little adjustments, you're not going to get a lot of pushback from customers. I personally have noticed it with coffee shops, where coffee goes from 183 to 184 to 187 to one, right? Small little adjustments, but in the moment you don't see it. So let's talk a little bit about how we can increase potentially our earnings outside of the pandemic through customer experience, through upselling, through this whole piece of service and really showing up powerfully for the customer. And yeah, just making sure our team knows more about the product and maybe what complements it.
Well, and this comes back to the fact, which I put the emphasis on net profits, because net profits would allow you to hire the right people, but also if you're going to make some investments, it's really about reinvesting in the business. and that will only come from net profits. And when I talk about reinvestment, the best investment you can make in your business is investing in an intellectual property, your assets, your biggest assets, which is your employees. They're the ones that are making you money. So coming back to front staff, which are serving people, is to make sure that they're properly trained. And by that, I mean, you know, there's certain ways you can read people. It's almost sometimes, if you're in, let's use an example of an interview. You go to an interview and you have somebody that talks all the time. Well, that can be negative or positive depending on who's sitting on the other side of the table. So usually I would tell people, I say, you know, give an answer, and then would you like me to elaborate on that? So from a service perspective, it's a little bit the same, because you never know what kind of person you're going to be dealing with. You cannot deal with everybody the same way. So by learning to read people, so people will sit down and, you know, so you bring them their water and everything else. And, oh, would you like a cocktail, you know, before, you know, a glass of wine or something before supper or your meal, or, you know. But most people don't even ask that. They just leave the water and they put the menu there. So they don't even ask that. But I'll bet you, and probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 times out of 10, somebody's probably going to, oh, that's a good idea, but it's out of sight, out of mind. So coming back to your customer service, this is a real good way of increasing your volume of revenue, especially, you know, and not only that, when you're at the table and you've taken their order, you can always make suggestions. Oh, people traditionally order this with this, you know, dish, or that this appetizer seems to go well with, you know, what you're looking at purchasing. And then, you know, again, at the end of the meal, you know, a lot of people like desserts. So, you know, and then the best thing you can do is, you know, you've got people that are visual, you got people that are auditory, you got people that are kinesthetic, you got people that are that have sensory. So listen, smell, taste, and so even if at any given point, so, you know, if you have something on the dessert bar that you would really like people, you'd like it to move, give them a small sample. What is it going to cost you? And if they taste it, oh man, this is good. Yeah, I'll have one of those. So, I mean, these are all little things you can do to increase the volume of your business without hurting anybody. And, you know, they're sitting down at the table. If you can get a few more bucks, you know, to lay on the table before they leave by just some simple gestures, it seems to work quite well. These are the things that successful businesses are doing. Really, when you look at it, why are some people so successful and others aren't? They're going that extra mile, but it's not costing them any more. They're just doing it the same way they're operating business, but they're just doing it wisely.
So smart, those little details. And I know that in our final segment of this series, when we look at quick fire, we throw out a whole bunch of different ideas to encourage more top line growth. But as we're speaking here right now, you know, one of the ideas that comes to mind is even takeout dessert. Right, like you know, they're there. They might not feel like sitting down and eating it right there and then, but nothing to prevent you from asking for it. One thing I want to ask you, because I know we're talking about encouraging a profit, a net profit, not a gross profit, a net profit of 10%. But I know in your experience, you work with clients that are exceeding that. So we're recommending 10, but tell us a little bit about what you've seen in the restaurant industry.
So, you know, in some instances, I've seen food costs down as far as 24%. And it's all about presentation. It's about the quality of the product on the plate. It's about the service you're providing, the atmosphere that you're in. So some people their cost of food is quite low, and even their labor cost is quite low, which allows them to have a better margin. So I certainly aim for 10% as a minimum, but once you reach that 10%, I encourage entrepreneurs, all right, where are we going to get our next percent to bring it to 11? And then if you reach 11, how are you going to get to 12? I'm not saying you're going to get to 50%. That'll probably never happen. But, you know, when we look at best in sector performers, which are the top 25 percentile in Canada, best in sector performers traditionally earn 10% or more. So it really doesn't matter what sector you're in, where you're located geographically, or how big the population you're serving, we still see businesses really doing well. But it's because that they've taken, you know, the initiative in order to make sure that all of the pieces are falling together. you know, if you cannot measure it, you can't manage it. So you need to have a measuring tool. And this comes back to the performance scorecard. It's ironic that we don't have very many accounting softwares that provide actually the percentages that you need as an entrepreneur to make informed decisions. The dollars will go up and down, but we need to convert those to percentages. So it's really about, you know, when I look at businesses and where we've worked, I see a lot of businesses that are reaching, you know, their potential, but even going beyond and further.
I love it. I love it. Thanks for sharing that, because I think that's important for business owners to hear now through COVID. I know that, again, the restaurant industry is a tough nut to crack in the best of times, but it is being done currently through COVID. It's just, you need to get really smart with your numbers. And unfortunately, this is the work that you can't abdicate, right? You can't delegate this out to the bookkeepers and the accountants. This is the work that you as the owner needs to do. Take ownership of your numbers, understand why you're making the decisions you are in that moment, right? Versus waiting to the end of the month or the end of the year when you get the feedback from your financial professionals.
And the beauty of the performance scorecard is that if you set your margin, let's say your cost of goods to be 30%, which would mean that your gross profit is going to be 70%. And if you've taken measures, let's say you've changed your menu pricing or you've done something in your business, this is where the performance scorecard would allow you to see, are the results actually happening? Simply because numbers don't lie. Beautiful. So if you've changed your menu pricing and you've done, then and it's not changing, there's something else going on in your business. This is where you need to dig a little bit deeper to find out what the issue is.
Beautiful. It's one of the things I love about numbers, just like you said, they do not lie. It's not like a marketing strategy or a people, right? Where you're dealing with emotions. It's black and white. It's working. It's not. And if it's not, you can fix it. So Ron, thank you. You are definitely a superhero. You're always here heeding the call of entrepreneurs when we need you the most. So thanks for sharing your time for this segment. So this segment is basically, this is our business basics, the best practices that restaurateurs can engage in regardless of pandemic. But please make sure you watch the next segment where we are getting into holding the line, which is about creating efficiencies through a pandemic. And then our third segment is, as I mentioned, quick fire. So Ron, thank you again. For those of you looking to connect with Ron has very generously provided us with his email address, which is in the show notes. There's a direct link, a direct line to Ron, so you can speak to him yourself. And as well, you will find links to the workbooks and the playbooks. I want to give a shout out to our friendly neighborhood service provider, Community Future Sunrise. The ladies there are phenomenal. If you are a restaurant owner in Southeast Saskatchewan, please reach out to them. They are there to help you and support you in this time of need. They're our frontline, our triage team, helping entrepreneurs to survive COVID. So always, as always, be brave, be bold, and be unabashedly profitable, even now through COVID. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you for the next segment. Bye for now.